What's going on, everyone? And welcome back to this episode of Split Screen D&D, place where we're attacking all things Dungeons & Dragons from both sides of the screen. My name's Tom Quinn, resident Dungeon Master here at Modern Myth.
And I'm Josh Winans, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
And today is going to, we're going to dive right into it. Today's episode is about location. And I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a
good one.
It's going to be a
But
banger.
Before we dive right in, first off, hey, those of you who have been subscribing and commenting and hitting that like button, it's been amazing. It's again, every week, it's just like, holy cow, people are actually enjoying this. So yeah, please continue. Those of you who are not, if you could please subscribe, like, comment. We're a young channel that helps us immensely. And also we're finally going on some Patreon stuff. And so we'll leave a link. If you could just drop a couple bucks, maybe donate to our beer fund, that would just also mean the world to us. But location.
Location, to me, the reason I think location is it's such a cornerstone topic is
setting, I think, is rather important in storytelling.
Well,
I hear.
setting is I'm gonna say is everything, really. It should be another character in your story for all intents and purposes. But as a DM, what I love about location is if you are, and this is not to say there is a right and wrong way to think about location, but if you are putting in your due diligence, if you are what I would say thinking about locations the right way, you are already doing a huge amount of the legwork for building lore into your world.
Yes, yeah.
I guess the best place I would think to start, and I'll be very interested to hear kind of on the player side, because so much by way of location, whether it's rules is written or, for a specific campaign setting, you have these quintessential locations throughout the world. But as DMs who are out there homebrewing their own settings, they have an opportunity to, place something into the minds of their players. And I think the goal with that really is to make those landmarks that you're building into your world memorable, such that your players have no problem going like, oh, that's where we met so-and-so. Oh, that's where we did XYZ.
Yeah.
And so landmarks is actually where I think I would start.
Okay.
Talking about this, and for a couple of reasons, because I think the landmark really there's a trickle down process from that landmark, because generally a landmark is going to serve some purpose, whether it's a historical purpose, whether it's a current purpose. Let's say it's a grand college of bards.
Oh, the greatest building of all time.
For some, but you can already get a sense that a city or a town that is defined by this immense college of minstrels and bards and has a very different feel than a town whose greatest landmark is a collapsed ore mine. Those are very, very different places.
Yeah.
And I think the trickle down that comes off of that, of all the lore of the history of this place, how did that college come to be founded? How did, I've got so much that I could say on that, but I want to actually hear kind of on the player side.
Yeah.
Am I way out in left field here? Is walking into a city where you go, that is something unusual or distinct, or there's such an opportunity there to tell the players a lot about where they are before they know anything about where they are.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, because I think there's, as with so many different things we talk about, there's a dangerous side to this. And I'm going to address it later, because it's not just landmarks. I think it's setting in general. But what I enjoy about landmarks or like monuments, or it could be anything really, it could be events, is you are teaching us about the area without the barkeep at the bar. Oh, welcome. Did you know this town is full of thieves? And well, if you notice, like, everything's run down, or if I'm trying to think of a landmark that would let you in on that it's a thief town. I don't know.
Well, I would say there are some towns that are probably defined by the Skid Row. There is a bar. There are towns in America. There's towns all over the world, I'm sure, where there is a pub, a bar, a tavern.
Yeah, Patrick's. It's a great place.
But it's one of those deals where like that place, like so many stories have unfolded there, and if those stories all revolve around the fact that the vast majority of people who are employed in this part of town are through underhanded means,
right?
That that begins to there's I mean that's a very different location than a prim improper tavern where you're being served tea cakes and
but for landmarks, I think that the beauty of what you can do with them as a DM is the nonverbal communication. Well, it is, I guess you're telling a story, but it's giving you the feel of the town,
right? And I completely I think you're right. It is a nonverbal, like in the lore episode we talked a lot about show don't tell, kind of,
and that's a great way.
And I think take for instance a colony that an old Spanish frigate, not this isn't necessarily D&D, we'll just say it's whatever, an old ship, sailing ship of some kind that was run up on the rocks and has been just beached there. And slowly, I mean, this thing is massive. Slowly over time, people came and begin to inhabit it. And that is Town Square, is this washed up, there's little buildings. That's the landmark. There is the landmark. This.
But it shows you the history of the town real quickly. You very quickly understand what's going on.
Right. And you get a definitive sense of the tone. And I think because of the way that we understand narrative, that you already have a sense. Now as a DM, you could use this to subvert expectations, but
that's fun.
You certainly have a sense if you come into this husk of a ship and you can hear sea chanties and the sounds of a brawl taking place in one of the taverns and all of this makes sense. It's got this piratey aloofness that,
super fun.
That just
absolutely
makes sense in that space. Like I said, you could subvert those expectations, but I think that visual indicator. Now, you brought up when we were kind of discussing location as a topic here. You said events as well.
Yes,
and I love that you touched on it because I think I completely agree. The event is that nugget that the players really want to walk away with.
Right.
And you referenced Fort Hill, like
in our campaign, there's a very, very big battle, at Fort Hill.
Well, and I think certainly that big battle, I mean, that was kind of written into the hearts and minds of the people of the East.
Yeah,
I think if you walk to Fort Hill today,
you mean the glassed crater?
That is the landmark. That I mean, let's say hundreds of years from now, in a same campaign world, you guys could walk into Fort Hill and the whole civilization that would have been built up, maybe they've rebuilt it, maybe not, but what happened, what transpired at Fort Hill, it was nuked effectively.
Megaton, for those of you who know the Fallout 3, but
and I think that its landmark has changed. And that's the interesting thing about landmarks is they are telling about the history of a location.
It'll be interesting to go back to Fort Hill and see what has happened if people move back. Are they trying to?
Right.
It'd be really interesting.
And so I think that you nailed it on the head because you're saying, well, could an event technically be a landmark? And I think the landmark is the aftermath of the event.
Yes.
And I think the event is really, like I said, that's the lore that they are going to consume. And sometimes you can give that to them just at a glance.
Right.
Sometimes you walk in, you go, what the hell happened here? And then there's more context to it. But
let me then, because you said you start with landmarks, but I don't think you need landmarks to have a very interesting location.
No, I don't think so. And I think, getting back to something that I've harped on, I know I've mentioned it in these, but there's a whole video on DM and the PM on contrast.
Plug.
And I think that gets down to this too. If every town that your players walk into has some grand edifice, this marvelous landmark, each one is going to start to lose its value as being an amazing thing.
Oversaturation, absolutely.
Sometimes the lack thereof is as telling. For another great example might be a town. I mean, certainly there are small towns that you could walk into, mining camps, logging camps, little fishing villages. These don't necessarily need a prominent landmark.
No, it's a small town, right?
Yeah, and I think that kind of trickles down to the next aspect of location, and that is often informed by a landmark if there is one.
Okay.
But that next aspect is the cultural identity of a location. that that again, a town that hosts the greatest college of bards has a unique cultural identity.
Everyone's pregnant all the time.
It's just nuts. Like it's
yeah, stereotypes, right?
But that, I think, really, like, there's so many times where things can be transpiring in a town, and those things, given the backdrop that is that location, just make sense.
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense if the entire town is this pristine white bardic college, everything is gilded in gold, and it's and there's a massive crime element, and everyone, no one's like, now that might be a big hook.
I was about to say, how cool would that be? Like, you have the some temple to Bahamut, but there is a super big evil cult that's growing underneath this. That's super cool.
And I think that's a great way that, again, you can subvert the expectations of location.
Yes.
But location, often, as you walk in, if you walk into, I guess you don't really walk into, you get off your plane, and you walk into New York City. New York City has an identity of its own.
Yes.
It is as much a character as any of the characters you'd meet on the streets of New York City.
There's a lot of movies where New York almost does have that. Taxi Driver, I think, is a great,
Yeah, I think, and I think every location, as a DM, however mundane, some consideration should be given to what is that location imparting to the experience that's taking place there, whether that expectation's being subverted or just fully realized. But clearly, our gilded bardic college town versus the deepest parts of the slums in Athkatla are very different personalities. Without even adding an NPC.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you're getting the feel of the town. So you still say, like, I'm beginning to wonder if landmarks is really when you want to start. I'm almost wondering if you want to start with feel, and then, like, okay, now I want to get into the history, and then the landmark comes.
Well, the main thing is I just think that the landmark is the thing that, like it or not, your players see first. We were talking about Egypt, and for the multitude of visual experiences that Egypt could be, it's very difficult to not immediately think about quintessential pyramids, Sphinx, miles and miles of sand and desert. There's an entire other side to Egypt.
Oh, yes, very much.
Doesn't immediately come to mind. And that's the power of landmark, I think. Is the sense that it's impressed itself upon you, and then you as a DM need to go, how do I make that big meaningful landmark? How do I tie that into the culture of this place? Why is that important? And that's the thing, is I think it does need to be important, because who's maintaining this?
I was gonna say, if you have a landmark, it needs to have a reason.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think,
even if it's a bad landmark, maybe it's a cursed rock.
Yeah,
like,
it could be a it could be a gallows. And literally, as you come into town, there are bodies hanging from this. I mean, if that doesn't stick with your players, if you come in, and you're looking around, and you're like, this place is terrible, and like,
this is where I want to build a vacation home. I bet the property value is really cheap.
It's the market's taking it down. But so I think just kind of moving in that hierarchy, and like I said, that is not to say that the landmark is more important. It's simply, there's a lot of times where, as a DM, if you're describing the approach, say you're coming in horse and buggy style, or on foot, or what have you, you're looking at this, and what is it? What do you see before you're anywhere near the town? You can't meet the people yet. You can't smell the smells. You can't. But you can see that glistening golden college, and that starts to tell the story of this place long before any of the NPCs have a chance to. Long before any of the conflicts have a chance to present themselves.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
no,
that's the only reason I start there, but. I think trickling down into the cultural identity of a location,
which is huge, man.
And I guess I would just be curious to hear about what, from the player perspective, you're walking into a new location.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, again, obviously, I am advocating for, some locations should absolutely define themselves by these landmarks and very stringent cultural identities. Others less so. I mean, there's that ebb and flow. But as a player, what would you say to all the DMs out there? What makes a location exciting, memorable?
I like village towns or just locations that have something. I don't know what word to use other than like quirky. Like maybe I'm just gonna use examples from our own campaign that we're running because it just comes to mind. Greenvale, I think is that right? Did I say it right?
The fact that you got the name, the fact that you got even part of the name is
I got a color right. Is but what for those of you who is just everyone because no one has seen this, it was a town, which straight up farmer town, as plain Jane as you could possibly get, but there was something off. People were just a little too nice, and I won't go too far into it, but.
Well, you're not going to spoil anything. I mean, that ship is
I guess that's true. But it turned out it was very Children of the Corn.
It was. It was kind of a bit of a body snatchers.
Some
kind
Soylent Green. I ate a meat pie. It turned out to be human. It's standard D&D stuff. Really.
Yeah.
You're not cannibalizing something by the end of your campaign. Did you really play?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a. I mean, if you haven't done by level 3, you better re-roll new characters. Right. Like just roll them up. Like you need a little human rolling around in your stomach. Or I mean, I'm sorry, that was a little.
Yeah, well, there's other races besides human, Tom.
I am an equal opportunity cannibal. You can eat any of the playable races, and it counts.
Yeah, there you go.
No, so here's the thing. With regard to Greenvale, is I think Greenvale was kind of on both accounts. Like clearly, the goal of that location was to subvert expectation.
Yeah, there was no landmark. It was straight up.
I would say the only remarkable thing about Greenvale is the incredible abundance of produce. It was the it was a farming town in a unique banana belt, arcane banana belt, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, and I think that coming into Greenvale though, you've already like nailed. Greenvale had a certain identity. And the interesting thing about that idea of subverting expectation or pulling the rug out with regard to location is that often speaks to the type of experience you're going to have somewhere. Because immediately, if you're subverting expectations, you could be doing it in the other direction. Certainly, like you could walk into a town and everything's on fire, or there's people hanging from the gallows, and then the first person you meet goes like, "Oh, hey there, friend, how's it going?" And it's just the greatest place on earth. But
trying to think of how that could work.
Here's actually another interesting pull from our campaign was the township of Firecrag, where Lord Felstad ruled. The reason I bring it up is because despite the fact that I don't think it didn't hold a particularly potent landmark. I mean, the keep that was up on the cliffside, but the town clearly operated in kind of an interesting
the vampire guy
fashion. Oh, this is what I got to put up with. So yes,
sorry, bud. Yeah,
Lord
it took me that long. Yeah.
I've
been freaking out trying to remember who the hell this guy is.
The vampire. Josh struggles with names. For those of you who haven't picked up on that. But the interesting thing is the actual identity of that town is what you guys came up against. I would say even more so than Felstad himself.
Yeah, because the way we played it. Yeah.
The operation of Firecrag was that. Because the vampires who ran that place had no need for taxes. They had no. I mean, they excelled at protecting their own lands.
Right.
It was, in almost every way, the most ideal place you could live.
Except for
it was hugely prosperous. Except for there was a lottery for whether or not you would be someone once. Every increment of time, they had to feed.
Right.
And they basically had kind of made a copacetic deal.
Yeah.
Whether that deal was a morally agreeable one, But that's kind of what the party came up against was someone was going to be fed upon. And obviously when your number gets drawn, it sounds like a bad deal.
Right.
But up until then,
it's a great deal.
You know, it was made clear to you that people could come and go as they pleased. But if you chose to stay in Greenvale, those were the terms. I'm sorry, in Firecrag, those were the terms that you stayed on. So it's just interesting because Firecrag only really became your opposition when you became opposed to the cultural identity of Firecrag.
Yeah.
And so
that was a weird couple sessions.
Yeah, there was. That was. A lot of people died.
A lot of people.
A lot of people died.
Innocents.
None of you guys, though.
That's how we do it, man.
You had a pretty gnarly.
You do not want to be in a party with the Rakish Rovers, man. You will die.
There have been some. Words getting out. You're not going to find too many allies moving forward. But you know, I think cultural identity, and again, whether that just speaks to the behavior of the people in a certain area.
How about this? I'm thinking like the big towns have like more diverse culture, and when I think of like a small farming town, the culture is probably a little like when you're just focused on survival and day to day, you're probably not going to have a bustling art scene.
Absolutely. And I think we probably even see that in real life. I mean, certainly, I would say the biggest cities in the country, in any country, are the more culturally diverse.
New York City
places.
has some of the best art and stuff coming out of it for a reason. Oh my god,
yeah, there's some good food there.
Oh.
But and absolutely, and I think again, opportunities to subvert expectations there, but you know, it makes complete sense why the pig farming, a small pig farming community in the middle of nowhere doesn't also host the Bardic College for the entire realm, you know?
Right.
So, and I think that's really, you know, when you talk about scope and scale of location, that really gives you something to think about. And I think, you know, big bustling cities, really there is, from the DM perspective, from the player perspective too, I think that's an overwhelming space. Imagine trying to run real life New York City as a DM and see it as a player. Like, where do you go?
Yeah.
You know, like literally you can walk into one of, you know, I mean, so and obviously we're not running a true to life.
Yeah. You're not running GTA 5,
but it's a good example of how I think when you get to a big metropolis, it's a nod to the fact that a bunch more is going on in locations like that, obviously, than
that's a really
those
good question.
Small towns. And that I think it holds hands well with the cultural thing is there are conflicts in these places. That's not to say you can't have conflicts in small towns, but you know, a goat farmer's goats being attacked at night is a problem. But two massive trade guilds on borderline going to war with each other, that's a different kind of problem.
Then would it be good to know what like their imports and exports are before you get into that?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say actually that's probably something that oftentimes we shouldn't glaze over, and you mentioned this already, the importance of nonverbal communication for location.
Right.
This is going to be a challenge for you because I'm going to say a name.
Shit.
But I think you're going to do okay with this.
All right, let's see it.
We'll just see how it goes on this whole.
Yeah.
A small village called Hidden Shores. Do you recall this place?
I do. It's a fishing village.
Right there. Now, who did you have to ask about whether or not fishing was their major trade?
Oh, it was freaking obvious.
And so that's I think that's the point is landmarks, markets, all of these places without like you could walk through any location, and I think players should be able to answer a few bullet pointed questions about a location without having talked to a single person, because I think that holds up to the real world. Now, obviously, in a metropolis, there might be hundreds of trades that are, you know, but if you walk into a town who has a major export or major import, that should be apparent. Industry springs up around that. You know, if you're a port city and there are no ships, that should raise a red flag for the players.
What is going on here?
Yeah, the docks, if they go to the docks and you go like, empty. There are no dock workers, no
Right.
ships, no, then maybe they start asking around like, what's going on here? And they go like, well, haven't you heard the fucking Kraken is like everything's shut down. None of the ports are running.
Oh, and then you just got to take down a Kraken.
And then you go, oh, well, it just so happens we're heroes.
We're at level 3. We'll take on a Kraken.
This is precisely what we do.
Is there a Kraken in the monster manual?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, crazy.
Kraken.
Oh, yeah. We're gonna. Man, underwater combat freaks me out, man.
That's a holdover from playing console games.
Holy crap! You have no idea, dude.
Dude, it is for me too. Everybody knows. Everybody knows when the music starts playing, and it doesn't. Everyone might think of their own game, but it's that fucking water level.
Because they always have an oxygen meter, and the lower it ticks, the faster the music goes. Oh my god, builds tension great, and they're masters at it. Yeah, but I freaking can't do it.
Talk about like a nice location. Preface is there is no oxygen in this location.
Yeah, easy cheesy.
Well, again, I mean, would be a culturally interesting thing to explore. But so trade and export, I love that, and like I said, I think that's the beauty. Is one, I didn't know if you were even going to remember the name Hidden Shores.
Hey, I subverted expectations.
Look, that was a pretty gnarly twist of events right there. But what I love is kind of the fact that you're able to prove the point that what people do for their livelihoods in a location should be pretty self-explanatory. Now, if that is pickpocket and steal people's things and murder them, maybe that's a little less detectable. But certainly the honest trades that are being plied, that should absolutely be that should be pretty apparent. I think. And that should also be, that could even be. Again, when we're talking about these big cities, a great way, I think, of thinking about big cities is to think about them as a series of smaller settlements, because you might move to an area that is
different districts.
District is a great way, however you want to think about it. But where, once you cross this street,
you're in the red light.
You're in the red light district, and like.
Wait, why do you always put red light districts in every single town? We'll go to like a fishing, like Hidden Shores had a
oldest profession in the world, baby. Hey, and I wouldn't put them there if you guys didn't keep spending your money. So
Paladin got to do what a paladin. Wait.
That was before your oath.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
you're scot free.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, you did a few Hail Marys, and now you're.
Yeah.
You're
well, I thought we retconned that shit, but oh well.
No, we definitely did not.
Sorry. Anyway,
so I think that those industries, I think something else that speaks immediately to what industries are going to be prevalent. I want to take one quick pause to actually say a lot of what we're talking about in this locations video. For anyone who hasn't checked out Dungeon Masterpiece, he has a entire series of videos on the geopolitics of really, really good videos, and they speak to exactly this kind of thing. Why certain cities exist in the ways that they do, because
another whole level too. When you think about like why, okay, so we have two cities right next to each other. What's the relationship to each other? How does that shape everything else? Oh my,
absolutely,
man, that's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, really, really, and again, I mean, his videos tend to be like, I want to say sub 10 minutes. He does a phenomenal job.
Good on him, man.
The geopolitics may be on the
we're already pushing like 30 minutes.
No, he's as concise as they get. Shout out to Dungeon Masterpiece.
Well done, sir.
Yeah, definitely for anyone who is listening to this who hasn't checked him out. If you're into cities and location, I would say it is standard reading, quote unquote, to check out one of those videos and just get a sense of it's a different way of thinking about developing your cities. But a big reason I think about that is because certainly those trades that are being applied, and those have huge geographic, like it wouldn't make sense if it's a fishing town in the middle of the mountains with no water nearby. Like,
right.
That's so there's a geopolitical relationship between a location and what's going on there. Another major implication, I think, on a location is the means by which you get there. And I think it's one that can slide under the radar. But let's say, for instance, you guys are traveling horse-drawn cart and you're
standard. Yeah.
So the vast majority of places are easily accessible to you. If it's on an island, obviously your means of getting there have to change.
Right.
And that should definitively. I mean, you're now dealing in a different cultural sphere.
That's true.
And so kind of the cultural implications imparted by a town that is primarily patroned by sailors and pirates is different than one that's primarily patroned by field hands and farmers.
Right.
You can take that to well, using that same example of being accessible overland. How accessible?
Ooh.
Because let's say a major metropolis, it's probably pretty accessible, or it wouldn't have become a major metropolis.
Right.
Now, there may be guards and things that prohibit you from entry, but actually getting to the gates should be pretty easy to do. And a lot of those metropolises, you can get to the gates on foot, you can get to the gates by air, you can get to them by sea, you have lots of ways of getting there. A location changes dramatically in terms of its cultural identity and the implications of that location if it's only accessible by air. Venza comes to mind as a location, and it's a place that could be very exclusive because of that.
Right.
You need a certain income level if you're going to travel by air. You need a certain you need the means of acquiring it, or their own private means of moving. And they were not shy about letting people know that it was an exclusive place to be. For anyone at home, Venza's location just prior to the Rakish Rover starting, but a floating island, the sister city to Stonemantle, which is down on the surface. But it's a good example, by air. If it's a little bit of thunder rolling in, if you guys caught that
thunder
one.
Rolls.
Say an aquatic,
fuck that. But yes, yeah.
Clearly there's implications for people who breathe air of going down to a city. Now, are you using water breathing spells? Are there potions? Is there some sort of vessel by which you can travel to this location?
Right.
But all of this has major implications on the party's ability to access a location and the cultural attitude that that location is going to have.
I'm reminded of the Wheel of Time series. The oh god, me and names. Two Rivers. That's where Rand and all of them. So those of you who haven't seen it, it's a very, very difficult place to get to.
Spoiler alert, it's a difficult place to get to.
If you'll learn that in the first 5 minutes.
You don't need to watch the series at this point.
Yeah. You learn everything.
You know everything.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. I gotta be quiet because it's such a good book. Excellent book. If you haven't read the Wheel of Time series. But because of that, talking about the cultural impact, they became very self-reliant. And they were like very tough people.
I love that. And obviously this can change from DM to DM, from table to table, from fantasy ethos to fantasy ethos.
Right.
A mainstay that seems to carry through a lot of those is dwarven culture. There is a certain self-reliance, disinterest in other cultural attitudes outside. And when you consider the way in which they live and the way in which the effort you'd have to go to get to their cities as a surfacer, it makes complete sense that they don't have a lot of interaction with someone from the surface.
Right.
And I think that so like I said, the cultural identity of these locations, and that's what I was ultimately going to get to with regard to the overland travel is if it's Baldur's Gate, pretty easy traveling in terms of just go there. If it's a distant whispered about keep on the top of a mountain where literally you have to mountaineer to get there.
Right. We're
very, very different number of visitors and the implications thereof. So,
and I'm also thinking like evil. We haven't talked about like if you go down to the Underdark and you come across a drow city. I mean, that's an incredibly different vibe.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that. And we start really, I would say, walking into landmine territory, especially in the social media sphere of the discussion revolving around if different places have different cultural identities.
Yeah.
Are there moral implications to those different identities? This is a very interesting place to be.
I'm scared of the internet, so I'll keep my mouth shut.
But you do bring up drow culture
Yeah.
Clearly, to human culture, I would say it generally is looked at and they go like, many of those practices are evil, if not all of them.
Yeah, 99%.
I would also say we fully subverted that in our campaign.
Well, yeah, but there's that 1% kind of idea.
Yeah.
But
Given the fact that there was some group of separatists that were willing to aid Kell in returning to the surface, but I definitely think that absolutely in the spirit of contrast, there should be some cultural identities that are way more abrasive to your party than others.
Well, and God, think about demons. No, sorry, demons maybe have it, but devils are like, and the layers of hell. I mean, they have a culture too.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not just good places and just happy towns. I mean, everything has that kind of
And yeah, we have been talking a lot about kind of, I'm going to put it in quotes, mundane locations. A city, obviously, that anything could be happening there. But many of the locations that heroes, that a group of heroes are going to travel to, are going to explicitly be locations that no one would ever really want to travel to.
Dungeon type things.
And I think everything that we have said
transfers over that
applies.
Too. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think so often it's really easy to just go like, okay, I made this really cool, big, bustling city. It's awesome. There's, there's halflings and there's
you don't put anything into the
And then you arrive at this evil location. You should absolutely, cool. Maybe a cult has been operating in the darkest depths of these caverns, and they're trying to do something nefarious. What else occupied those spaces before the cult showed up?
Right.
Are they still there? Are they fighting against the cult? Have they succumbed to their evil manipulations? All of these are, and that's not to say that, in a network, a labyrinth of underground tunnels, that starkly different cultural identities couldn't exist in relatively close proximity. I don't know if it's fair to say that flumps have a cultural identity, but they certainly are a bright spot.
I think they're nomadic. I don't think they have cities so much, but they're no, they definitely have a culture.
Oh well, yeah, they definitely have a culture. I just don't know if it would be fair to attach that to any location.
Yeah.
But so I think that's kind of moving through that hierarchy, I guess I would say, of the different elements that give location personality.
Well, going off that, so I think we've done a lot of good things, but I think one thing that we haven't talked about that I think is what most people almost, especially in the world of Critical Role and all that, is the NPCs, the people who dwell within the cities.
Yes.
Or where a lot of people go, which I think, I like how you're going about it, is the people are last. First you set up the culture. First you set up all these things. Ooh.
It's a big one.
It is a big one. So
if no one can hear the thunder, then they're gonna be going, "What are these idiots doing?"
I know. I think you can hear the thunder.
Yeah, I hope they can.
Thunder rolls.
If he gets a third thunder rolls off, everyone watching this video has to subscribe. It's required.
If you're still watching this, if you're not subscribed, bless your hearts, subscribe. But yeah, I like the idea of starting with all this other stuff, then build your NPCs, knowing all this about the city.
Yes, and that I think you nailed it. And that's the thing is, I think when we're talking about memorable locations, so often that's attributed to an interaction. It's attributed to an NPC that just defined a location for any number of reasons. But I think importantly, we as DMs, when we're instantiating NPCs in any location, we need to understand that NPC's relationship with that location. Is this New York City and this person's born and raised New Yorker?
Right.
Or did this person show up yesterday?
Right.
And that's a very different NPC.
And actually, if you want to, like I'm thinking, if you want to make a super memorable NPC, you almost want to go against the grain to make them stick out even more.
Well, I certainly think I think one of two extremes. Either your NPC so thoroughly embodies the cultural identity of a location that it's just like, the location almost becomes synonymous with that NPC, or vice versa.
Right.
But certainly I think there are exciting ways of using NPCs to subvert what the players have come to expect of a location. And again, the more complex a location is, bigger and bigger cities, the harder it is to slap a single identity on. And I would actually say the harder it is to subvert that expectation, because again, it's like, you have an expectation of New York City as being this big, bustling metropolis.
Yeah.
It will be that. I mean, it's like, if you walked into New York City and literally not one car was driving, not one person, you would lose your shit. Like it would be such an unnerving experience.
Right. There'd be like a zombie. Actually, that'd be interesting. A ghost town, that's a cool idea. But yeah, if you can't yell at some taxi cab driver that you're walking over here, like, are you really in New York?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Definitely do that. By the way, no one's gonna beat the shit out of you if you do that.
Yeah. and no matter how far you originate from New York, do your best New York accent when you say it. But no, I think, and I think you really nailed it on that. Now, the episode, like I said, I don't want to stray too far into the NPC side because it is an episode on location.
Yes.
But everything that we've talked about, this trickle down from these landmarks, which inherently speak to the culture, that culture, which is in many cases defined by the trades, secondarily defined by the ease of access to a given location, all of that paints itself on the inhabitants of a town. And that's the other thing too, is you could certainly exist within transient spaces where, Vegas is a great example. How many people live in Las Vegas versus how many people are in Las Vegas at any given time? You know what I mean? Like, and so you could certainly have towns, trading posts, for instance, which don't really, they've got a small local population where the location itself doesn't carry as much identity as the tapestry of characters that are moving through it.
Right.
But I think that's a little bordering the scope of this conversation, because we're really talking about the way a location imparts itself.
And you hit it earlier, like, hey, don't make everything this grandiose.
Right.
One, oversaturate the player, and two, you're making more work for yourself than you need to.
Right.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing, I mean, I don't know from a player side, what other thoughts you have about location. Like, I just give you open season.
Mic. All right. No, actually, there's something I wanted to bring up at the beginning, but I wanted to hold off because it wasn't specific to one thing.
Yeah, you mentioned maybe the pitfalls to concern yourself with.
What can become a danger of location, especially, I can't imagine, as a DM, you spend X amount of hours planning a city. Oh, this is where this happened, and blah, 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 and this, blah, and you create this amazing tapestry. And here comes the players, and they're only looking at one single strand of the tapestry, and you're like, wait, motherfuckers, this is a tapestry, and you're looking at one strand. I think the danger that can happen is you overload the players. Like, you're like, oh, you walk into the city, and here you see this monolith, and you spend like 30 minutes just describing a location, and your players are like checking out because they're bored.
Right.
Like, let them experience it organically.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as much as we've kind of knocked on the door of the nonverbal communication about a place, that is not open rein to
narrate everything.
Spend a 2-hour session, just talking about the cool things in this town.
Right.
Let them unfold that place.
And it'll mean so much more to the players if they discover.
Absolutely.
It's what means more is being shown something or discovering something. Discovering something means so much more.
Definitely.
And as a player, I think I hit on it earlier. Everything, I think the landmark is really good about find something interesting. Like, if you're making a very key area, find that interesting thing and really make it interesting so the players want to discover more and more about it.
Right.
Like, whether that's a landmark, an event. But yeah, I think those are the big things. And also, gosh, there's so many things. All I'm doing is kind of going back over and reviewing, but don't forget about the non-NPC, the dungeons. Don't forget about the those things.
Yeah, I mean, those are, and like I said, I think I have certainly been guilty of putting more thought into, let's call it, the living places on occasion than the places that you guys are going to explore. Like, oh, it's a decrepit crypt and there's baddies.
I'll give you a major props for where we are right now in the puzzle room with the Yuan-Ti. It's very clear that the Yuan-Ti were a very major civilization, very intelligent. They were able to predict all time, really, through and made a machine that could show you all time through the stars. That's an amazing civilization.
Well, and what I like is where you are now. And like I said, I don't want to say too much, because if there's anyone who's watching,
no, tell me how to solve the puzzle, bud.
But it's for now, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
That room has become the landmark of this area. I mean, it is now, that is not to say that it is the landmark, because you're working towards something, but I think the importance of the space you're in doesn't need to be stated. It's pretty self-evident, like,
right.
So, and like I said, I think, but I do think I will echo your side, because even as you were saying it, I went, you know what? That's something I need to make sure and remind myself is, oh, they're basically, we're moving into dungeon crawl territory.
And the thunder rolls.
And there it is. Smash it.
You must subscribe by the rules we just made up.
By the rules of thunder. That just, it was a good reminder to me to go, you know what? When I know you're going to some place to delve into the dark places and spend a little extra time thinking about, what was that place before? I mean, it's really easy to do when you're exploring lost ruins. But I think oftentimes when like, oh, hey, there's this big encounter coming up, there's this, though that's not an excuse to not allow that location to impart some personality into the
I like how you
experience.
say that the location can be a character unto itself. I like that.
Yeah, and I think there are some locations that you are so compelling you don't need NPCs in them. You could enter a space that's just, the location is saying so much about what has transpired.
And I know I referenced Taxi Driver, but I thought of a way better example. Crocodile Dundee. I'm sure have you ever seen Crocodile Dundee? Have you seen the second one as well?
Yes. The fact that you use the terms a way better reference and then pivoted from Taxi Driver to Crocodile Dundee is making me seriously question.
No, just that the setting's more of a character, because Taxi Driver.
Yeah, actually, that's true. That's true. But I do think I really did like Taxi Driver as a reference. But I do agree that
it's just a great
film. Like they really use the big city
Talking to me.
to, and conversely, like a converse example would be something like City Slickers, where the location is really what is.
Is that Billy Crystal when he pretends to be a cowboy?
Yeah, a bunch of city boys go out and.
That is a great old time.
So, but it's a good example of the way in which the location in which someone is accustomed to just being a fish out of water by way of location means a lot, especially for actual fish out of actual water. That's
my
a big
gosh,
deal.
and how could I not mention Dune? The planet Dune itself is such a, it is a character.
I'm disappointed it only came up now.
I know.
We don't even have
because
time
I'm such
to
a huge
explore it.
Dune guy.
I know.
I'm sorry.
But no, Dune is a great example of some awesome.
And Mad
location
Max
development.
too. Any apocalyptic movie.
There's tons.
And
that's the thing. I think
Land Before Time.
Any good story. Part of the reason it's a good story is because they've made effective use of location.
No.
It's not so much to recap. It's I guess my final point, I think we are out of here.
I think I don't need to wrap up.
With the
thunder
storm
rolls.
in, we don't. We get nothing for the fourth, so we
damn it.
Yeah.
No, now you got it. Now you give us money. I don't know if I got.
It's just everything we've been talking about. We've kind of been talking about these individual things. More importantly than those individual components is to be thinking about the way that all of this manifests as lore in your world. Because maybe everything we just talked about happened 10,000 years ago. And the party's walking into this place with all of this stuff having happened way back then. Well, how is that seeped into the ethos around it? How does a massive city to the north having an economic collapse impact the 100-mile radius around it. And I think so much of those considerations as you begin dotting your world, if you're homebrewing a world with locations, and going through this thought process of thinking, what about this? What about this? What do they trade? What are they? That you get to a place where you really have a hard time finding absence of lore, because all of these locations, if you're allowing that to bleed out until it rubs up against another locations.
That gets me excited.
Well, it is Tuesday.
There it is.
We finally found it. So that's the only thing I would have to say. Both players and DMs alike. DMs, when you're thinking about your locations and hopefully employing some of these thought processes, if you're not already, you're doing a ton of the legwork for developing lore. And players, keeping that in mind when you're in interesting locations or when you're in not so interesting locations. In some cases, the really interesting thing about that location is just behind the next door, or just down the next alleyway, or and we've talked about it with the lore. A lot of times as DMs, even though it breaks our heart, we'll stay tight-lipped, even if there's something really, sometimes we throw out breadcrumbs.
Which again, I can't imagine the heart ache as we never explore that amazing thing that you had. But I like that we always say, it's like, well, keep that in your back pocket and reuse it.
I really think that the recyclability of content is potent. So I don't know about you. I don't know. I don't think I have anything else.
No, I said my piece.
I think that just about wraps us up.
Okay.
How are we taking it out today?
Oh, I don't know.
How are we taking it out today? Let's see. I brought us in.
Yeah. Okay. Want me to take us out?
Yeah.
What do you got? Sometimes I'm good at these. Sometimes I'm really, really bad.
I have just arrived in the Grand Bazaar.
Oh, I'm going to be a DM here? All right.
And you are hawking the shabbiest of wares, but the world is mine, and at some point I need to know it. Could be theirs too.
Yeah. Welcome, traveler, to my...
Hey, I'm...
All you say. But look, I have here the mysteries of the East. For see in this, it will make Julian... Oh, crap.
I was about to ask him who would Julianne Fry.
It will not break. Oh, it broke.